Japan had extended its tentacles deeper into China and was rapidly rearming its navy to challenge American power in the Pacific Ocean. In the Atlantic world, almost all of the European democracies had fallen under the extraordinary onslaught of the unstoppable Nazi army and air force. Adolf Hitler's relentless aggression had transformed the continent into one huge prison house. As Hitler described the stakes of the war he had provoked, "Two worlds are in conflict, two philosophies of life. Only one could survive." Unlike in Roosevelt's first 100 days in 1933, or his second in 1935, far more than the nation's economic and social well-being was now at stake. The lives of tens of millions of people around the world, and the fate of free and democratic governments everywhere, hung in the balance. Judeo-Christian morality, along with the Enlightenment principles of freedom under law, individual rights, and due process, trembled on the verge of extinction. Those cold and wet winter months between November 1940, when Roosevelt and his team began delineating a strategic plan for possible war, and March 1941, when he signed the Lend-Lease Act, constituted his third 100 days. It was ultimately the most vital and consequential period of his presidency. During those 100 days, the president would initiate the pivotal programs and approve the strategic plans for America's successful leadership in World War II. Leadership on which hinged the survival of the civilized world. This period marked a critical change for FDR. A master of communication and persuasion, he had fluctuated, temporized, calculated, and shifted for years in response to a public that was more receptive to isolationist leaders who rejected the foreign entanglements that had pulled the country into the First World War. It had been simpler in 1914, when, as Woodrow Wilson's young, bellicose Assistant Secretary of the Navy, he had freely criticized the president for not taking stronger action at the outbreak of the war. He complained then to his wife, Eleanor, that gullible Americans were being fed a lot of soft mush about everlasting peace. Hitler and his Nazis, who swept into power in Germany in 1933, changed the dynamic of global politics. They were a malignant menace that grew year by year. But for most of the 1930s, FDR took no stronger action than words. In January 1936, as Hitler was threatening to march into the Rhineland in flagrant violation of the Treaty of Versailles, FDR proposed in his State of the Union message that the United States adopt a well-ordered neutrality and use its moral influence to combat intolerance and autocracy in the world. The following August, speaking in Chautauqua, New York, he emotionally expressed his horror of war. "I have seen war," he said, recalling his visit as Assistant Secretary of the Navy to the front lines in war-ravaged France in 1918. "I have seen war, on land and sea. I have seen blood running from the wounded. I have seen men coughing out their gassed lungs. I have seen the dead in the mud. I have seen cities destroyed. I have seen the agony of mothers and wives. I hate war." His fervent hope was that envy, hatred, and malice among nations had reached their peak and would be succeeded by a new tide of peace and goodwill. The noblest monument to peace was the American-Canadian border. 3,000 miles of friendship. Did his horror of war and passion for peace mean that the president had embraced isolationism? Well, no, and definitely yes. "We are not isolationists," he stated, "except insofar as we seek to isolate ourselves completely from war." In public, especially before the 1936 presidential election, the president allied himself with the